The first encounter with art provokes the almost subconscious question, what is it? We as human organisms identify, judge, and even pigeonhole what we see in order to understand. This identification process provides a rational sense of order within us. We recognize it, therefore we understand it. We know what we are looking at. But there are artists who challenge all of our senses and sensibilities. Then the questions abound. What does it mean? Is it art? Why do I not like it? Am I supposed to like it? And what is it? To put oneself and one's work out there, to push oneself, one's medium, and even one's viewer to new perceptions is to risk, to challenge. And this is the place of the cutting edge.
Cutting edge, like lots of things in art, may be an illusion. If, for example, I present you this tube of paper and you were to try to draw it, you'd want to describe these lines as edges, basically, of a form. But the fact is, there's no edge there. There's just a continuous surface. And I like to think about cutting edges as really being that way. The artists who are on that edge are taking us around a corner to a place that we can't quite see yet.
The issues that the people in the art world deal with sometimes are very esoteric, and they're not always pretty. So sometimes the cutting edge is considered ugly or upsetting, and oftentimes that's what the cutting edge really is. It's pushing limits. It's pushing what's common knowledge of what's propriety, what is right, what is just, what is politic, what isn't.
Well, let's say all the white ones, all the white textured ones are done this, trying kind of going around.
But what are these artists pushing against, pushing beyond? Some are pushing against the traditions of their art training, against the conventional language of art from ages past, with its vocabulary of composition, perspective, and line. They take these and other concepts to redefine and even create a new language to communicate with us, their viewer.
All right. Yeah, these are good. These look elegant.
Many of these artists are pushing within themselves, searching for a new articulation of their inner perceptions of the world around them. Through their art, they speak to us about issues of environment, physical, social, and political, and about those concerns particular to each individual. They are forging their language in new images, new application processes, and even in new media. We, the viewer, are called to listen. There has always been a cutting edge in the history of art. The tranquility of these water lilies by Claude Monet belies the fierce public disapproval of his work and that of his peers. Those artists, known as Impressionists, dared in the 1880s to render their subjects with new uses of colors and techniques. The result was a fresh luminosity and a new way of subjective seeing. The viewer was not pleased.
When their work was first shown, it was soundly criticized in a negative way by many of the critics of the time and derided, and it created a great furor, and consequently their careers, personal careers, suffered in terms of sales and being able to support themselves initially. And they persevered, and as people saw more and more of this and of the Impressionist works through their exhibitions, they gradually came to, I think, to to feel more comfortable and familiar with it. We reached the point where today we look back on it and we I think, have a hard time understanding why people ever reacted in a negative way towards these very beautiful paintings. If you look at contemporary art today in that sort of context, at some point the work that's being done today will be history, and we'll look at it in a very different way, and we will have grown with it, and we will have accommodated it into our culture, and it'll all seem very natural, and 100 years from now people will look back on some of the artists that are controversial today and perhaps think, well, why did they ever question that? Why did they ever feel uncomfortable with that?
I think any artist that would consider themselves on the cutting edge should have a thorough understanding of what traditionally has been done in the past. You need to know what the past is so you can either leave it behind or elaborate on it or go a whole new direction.
Printmaker Laura Ruby has hiked Diamond Head Crater for years. Her passion is the inspiration for a continuing series of serigraphs begun in 1985.
We see Diamond Head every day from many different perspectives in the city, and we think of it, generally speaking, as a pristine, beautiful, natural monument. But yet the interesting thing is that once we get inside, we see that it's riddled with military bunkers. And this is the origins of my artwork, that contrast between that pristine beauty and the almost desecration by military structures within the natural monument. Diamond Head's always fascinated me because it represents the Hawaiian land and the appropriation of the land, whether by ali'i or contemporary 20th century military means. It's been cut up, divided up, segmented, and given to whoever is the controlling power or force. I think I parallel it in my Diamond Head series, in that I show fragmented sections of history, of different cultural uses of the land, of various artifacts being brought together in fragmented ways. It's on a single fabric, on a serigraph, a silkscreen printing on paper, but it is a fragmentation that's brought together into one whole. One aspect of cutting edge, if you can call it that in these contemporary times, is that the word appropriation is often used. Often it means appropriation from earlier art historical times of bringing together unusual imagery and placing them brutally in a context next to another image of perhaps another time frame. Civil defense at Diamond Head is an interesting combination of the 20th century military mentality, I guess you might say. Everyone was afraid that there would be further bombing here, and so all people in the state were issued gas masks. Above them, in this military bunker setting, are the Lono figures. These are the warriors, if you want to call them, of peace and good harvest, and they are the protectors of these civilians. Addressing celestial navigation, that's actually one of the life-affirming ones that I did, of the first arrival of the first Hawaiians. The sky above is the sky as they imagine it. They probably had no particular knowledge of what the northern hemisphere was like, and so they made up their own. And I used, to represent this, I used the life-affirming petroglyphs, that is the birth symbols, the pico holes, and other positive signs. I think making art or being creative is about bringing things together that have not been brought together before, allowing yourself as an artist and others, you hope, to think about things in new ways, ways that haven't been thought about before.
An artist on the edge selects the medium and then pushes it beyond what's known and expected. Investigation of the properties of the medium can lead to new application processes and subsequently new images. Kathleen Rowley, a Honolulu paper artist, is one of those explorers.
What I'm doing here is spraying paper pulp, and I spray them through a gun that's usually used for texturizing ceilings. Compressed air forces it out, and I can direct it in a a fairly narrow or a fairly wide spray pattern from about 8 inches to maybe about 2 feet wide. The great advantage of this is that I can use paper in a way that I can't if I were to just form flat sheets. I could spray it on unusually shaped objects like the ivory tower, or I can spray it on a large expanse of fabric and not have any break points where I would if I had to join pre-made sheets.
Roley prepares her work for an exhibition in a local gallery. As the show is in a newspaper building, the theme is words.
This is a word box. I call it Play on Words. It's an environment in which words can be played with. And it's at ground level. It reminds me of sandboxes and all the kinds of games that I would play with as a child, with little letters all over the floor, and then these big words which a person can actually play with and take out and put around. Words to me can be abstract things that refer to ideas, but they're also very physical and playful. And this is kind of a way of putting them in a physical environment in which they have personalities themselves and where people can come and play with them and arrange them in ways that they think they should go.
For most contemporary artists, the meaning of their work is multi-layered and personally subjective. This exhibition is part of Roley's thesis for a master's degree. In her research, she discovered that medieval libraries chained books into place. She incorporated that image into her structure, the Ivory Tower.
It had a sort of ring of truth about the connection between the school environment and how much time you spend there, how much time I've spent there. The structure of the place that kind of keeps the information in one space. Part of the reason I make my work interactive is so the meaning of the work can evolve in the viewer's presence. It's like the difference between going to France and seeing a movie of it. You know, I want the viewer not to stand away and kind of contemplate this work and wonder, what is this person trying to say? But to be able to move through it, and in moving through it, you become a part of it. There's no way you can't be part of what's happening.
At the presentation company, we help our clients to communicate with clarity so that they can increase their sales or communicate their message no matter what it may be. After we consult with our clients, we find out what it is they need to communicate and then what is the best way to communicate it. What we found was that there was a niche that needed to be filled in our business, which was using computer graphics.
Before this shop was equipped with computer graphic capability, everything was done by hand. You would end up with a finished piece of artwork, and then if the changes were to be done, then you'd have to go back and by hand, take the X-Acto knife and again cut gels and shoot negatives, and this is very time-consuming work. We, on the other hand, we edit instantaneously. Clients can be right in front of us and watch us make changes, be it in shape, color, hue, anything.
Unlike other flat-surfaced medium, this computer can create a three-dimensional shape from back to front with appropriate shading. Photographs are stored within the computer and then are wrapped around the ball as one wraps paper. One of the complaints against computer art is that it appears to be easy, too instant. and that perhaps anyone can do it.
I have in my office, close to my desk, a quotation from Colby Chandler, who's chairman of Eastman Kodak. It goes back to 1983 or 4, where he said to financial analysts, he said, before, where we had traditional forms of imaging, today we only have an ever-accelerating pace of change, electronic imaging.
But once you get the image, I think that you still need to say, what are the aesthetic criteria? What are the visual standards that have held true all through the history of art? And how can those be applied to this new image, regardless of how it's been made? And I think that's where critics may be very divided in terms of artists' use of new technology. There may be some things that are off-putting about the medium itself. Maybe just on a conceptual level, they think this is, it's a sort of a purist stance to say if you don't have a paintbrush in your hand, it can't be art. I think we've gotten beyond that, basically. I'm overstating it, but I think that you can create a wonderful image with a computer. You can create a terrible image with a computer. The computer does not make the difference, the artist does, and I think that's really the essential point.
It's, a pleasure of pushing the paint, moving the paint, where the paint becomes more than just depicting something, just an illustration. There's a direct involvement with the material of what it is.
Painting as a medium went through a period of rejection by modern artists because it was considered too traditional. After working in other media, Russell Tsunabe has returned to painting to enjoy its history and its potential.
It's a very rich tradition and something that, I feel really connected to and want to get to know better. It's a continual learning process for me, and the development that I feel a strong connection with my predecessors, going back to Manet, actually going back as far back as Manet, and coming up through Larry Rivers, Robert Rauschenberg, artists such as Barnett Newman, Clifford Steele. I feel a direct relationship to them. It's like a family.
Tsunabe paints his opinions about social justice in haunting, allegorical images. He is working on a painting for his Atomic series.
I put in a lot of passion painting these pictures. The reason why I came back to painting, first of all, I think it was a way of expressing certain feelings that I had concerning social, political situations, including environmental. And so probably, there's a lot of frustration, maybe anger built into that. What I found out was, as much as I was shaping the paintings were shaping me too, philosophically, where I began to see that just the act of painting, of being able to paint, suggested some kind of sign of hope. And then I began to realize that I could use the human figure as a metaphor for the human spirit. And as I started working along, it didn't become necessary for the painting to have the figures inside, that the painting itself became the metaphor.
For other artists, such as Hong Kong resident Lai Sin Ho, the passion may not be so public. It is a deeply internal process that has challenged an artist trained in traditional Chinese art to express her feelings of life and death in metal and ceramics.
I want to express the feelings about life is a transformation process. It transforms laterally by the process of growth and decay. And the first section is representing growth stage. The centerpiece is representing a development stage. This part of the piece is representing a deteriorating stage. This is the whole idea of this piece. For me, art is not only making an object. I think for me, art is a ritual for me. And when I combine two materials, I have different dialogue with the materials, and I also have different dialogue for myself. And I try to mix two media together, and I also let both materials transform their usual limitation to another direction. I'm doing the same thing for myself. I want to transform myself to another direction and try to make my art communicate. The communication with other people is a very important part of my work.
But is it art? When is it not? These questions were asked repeatedly during a student art show at the University of Hawaii. One artist, Robert Guerin, chose to sculpt his entry not with clay or wood, but with fresh bread. The public's reaction was swift.
When are you going to get real art? I ate the bread. Thanks, it was yummy. Where did you find all that bread? I bet it would have fed a few mouths in a needy country. It made me think of Christ, the crucifixion. Great way to waste bread. Makes a stupid art piece.
The audience was confused as there was no artist statement posted. This commentary may be the only verbal communication between artist and audience and explains the motivation behind the work.
Well, as far as there not being an artist statement, it's my idea that it's not proper to me to put a statement when, you know, my statement is the piece. What the attempt was directed at was showing from an outside viewpoint, how ridiculous and temporal and socialized, institutionalized social structure can be. And I think I pretty much expressed that just through the placing of the piece in the gallery and allowing the bread to just disintegrate.
Where can a person go to learn about something he or she doesn't understand? This estate in the hills behind Honolulu is the new home for the Contemporary Art Museum. Opened in the fall of 1988, this museum has an unique mandate. Unlike the Honolulu Academy of Arts, this museum will only keep its art for 40 years.
The difference is that for us, contemporary art has been defined as being the last 40 years. I mean, that's what we're going to deal with. We don't define contemporary art as only 40 years, but we decided that it's enough time for things to become sort of senior. You see how they're being taken in retrospect somewhat, and it also is a way in which we won't be taken over by our collection.
Frau Sugar, with his solid background of art administration, understands the importance of public education.
One of the benefits of having living artists is that you can bring them in to actually dialogue about their work. And one of the things we want to do is institute lecture programs, and eventually we'll have an artist in residency program here. We have a building that will be available for artists to come and live. Hawaii is at a moment now where there are lots of cross-cultural, cross-pollinations taking place, and it's like being pregnant, and we're sort of in the 9th month. What I want to do is provide an arena to have these things, you know, brew together and hopefully stimulate, if not the economy, certainly the minds of the people that live here, and also for visitors, because many visitors who come here have no idea of the richness of the Hawaiian art community. Through exhibitions and discussions and lectures and bringing the school children in and all those kind of programs, let people understand that this place is not some backwater, that we're really the future.
James Jensen is a curator of Western art for the Honolulu Academy of Art. He is responsible for the exhibition and collection of art from ancient to contemporary cultures in the Western Hemisphere. The Academy owns a fine contemporary collection which is housed in the Clare Booth Luce Wing.
What I look for, basically, because there are so many possibilities to choose from, is work that I think is very good, and that moves me in some way, and hopefully will move the public. And one special program that we have is called the Focus Gallery, which is a program that is specifically intended to present exhibitions of contemporary art as fairly up to the minute, or as recent as possible, to kind of provide an opportunity for the residents of Hawaii and the visitors from the mainland to see a sampling, selection of the types of things that are going on, not only here in Hawaii, but in particular on the mainland.
And for those of us who are not art professionals, how are we to look at this new work?
I think in terms of other people looking at art, I think they expect too much from themselves, perhaps, in their attempts to come to grips with contemporary art.
It's very important for people to remember that if they can go and really be open-minded about looking at work, that their response is as valid a point of departure as mine is, or anyone else's.
If you want to understand anything about contemporary art, you have to spend time with it. And it's not something you can digest in a viewing or a couple of viewings. It takes regular involving with the work itself, because you have to change your way of seeing things.
It doesn't necessarily even matter that you can describe it in terms of color, shape, form, line. I mean, all that very traditional and yet very useful vocabulary, but really to just internalize it and begin to talk to yourself in a way about what you're seeing. All sorts of responses are likely to arise, and quite natural ones, in the face of work that can't be easily described, can't be easily defined. And I think that, you get a lot of fairly standard responses. The typical one, of course, is, oh, my 3-year-old could have done it. That may be true, but they didn't choose to do that, or it came out differently, or I think it's a question of the difference between doing it once by accident and doing it with some intention.
And it takes people willing to take the abuse from the people who hate it and say, my kid could do it, and all of that, and just regularly keep bringing people back and say, look at this, now just consider this. Maybe it's a little different than you're used to, but think about it. Maybe there's something else here.
You just give it your best shot. You take the chance that, it might fail miserably, but on the other hand, you might have a success, and not only a success as kind of a goal or a solid, plateau to reach, but another place to explore where no one's gone.